last week how on the same day where they quietly announced that guy had nothing on him, they also announced that the appeal that had been made against the Queensland-specific anti-bikie laws had been thrown out by the High Court. And I wanted to discuss quickly what has happened subsequent to that. Now, we mentioned on the show on the Friday last week, hey, the journalists are also saying to the Queensland Premier Campbell Newman, don't you think other states should bring this in? And we predicted, yeah, of course, that's what's going to happen now. Yeah. Well, let me just get my notes in order here. All right, so yeah, we noted on the Friday G20 special that the High Court had thrown out the appeal. Of course, if people aren't aware, the VLAD laws are Stasi-style anti-right to association laws, which allow the state government to declare any organisation of 3 or more people an outlaw organisation and slap instant imprisonment terms on anybody in breach of those laws. And that's just part of those laws. Queensland is, of course, our third largest state with a population of about 5 million people. The biggest city is Brisbane, which is where we sit right now. Now, we also noted on that Friday episode that the immediate line of questioning from the so-called journalists was loaded towards lobbying for similar laws across the rest of the country. And we didn't have a chance to cover it in the G20 specials because we were naturally focused on the G20 itself. But guess what was printed in the Fairfax Press in Melbourne the very next day after that High Court decision, and we predicted that other states would soon follow suit. This is a quote from the Fairfax Press down there in Melbourne. Under a headline, "Police fear delays in tough new laws are turning Victoria into a bikie Switzerland." Quote, "Senior police are concerned that Victoria is becoming a bikie Switzerland because the state government has failed to heed requests to hand over sweeping new powers to law enforcement. The warning comes as one of the country's fastest growing outlaw motorcycle clubs, the Mongols, staged a run into Melbourne on Saturday that police sources complain they were powerless to stop. Police are pulling their hair out," a high-ranking source told Fairfax Media.
Oh my God.
It is understood that senior police have been asking the NAPTHEN government for more than a year to introduce new laws that would require licenses and fit and proper tests for the heavy haulage and debt collection industries, which are increasingly being targeted for bikie infiltration. Police have also been asking the government to consider implementing Queensland-style anti-association laws that could prevent large numbers of bikies congregating in runs like the Mongols did on the weekend. "We are concerned that without these laws, Victoria is becoming a bikie Switzerland compared to Queensland and New South Wales," the source said. End quote. So again, on the Friday, they announced that the appeal to the High Court was thrown out. We predict that other states will follow suit. The very next day, the Fairfax Press print what I just read out. Now, I'm not going to read that article in full, but it gets even better. Again, go to our info box, check this article out for yourself. Here's a part towards the end of that same article that I just read. Quote, "Detective Senior Sergeant Iddles criticised both major parties on their law and order platforms ahead of the election," there's a state election in Victoria coming up, "for their failure to commit to increasing police numbers on the beat. You can postal vote starting from Monday, and neither side of politics has made a commitment to police numbers," he said. End quote. So again, this goes back to that symbiotic relationship. The police will tell you how dangerous it is out there. There's all these problems, all these bikies, all these boogeymen. Everyone's in big trouble. We need more police numbers. And the media prints it. And yet people still think that they can trust the mainstream media as unbiased or objective. The police are just talking their book, and the compromised media going along with it. Now, for international listeners, Victoria is our second largest state, population of about 6 million and growing rapidly. And it's clearly only a matter of time before they get their own so-called anti-gang laws. Our largest state is New South Wales, population about 7 million and growing. And in early October of this year, they also won a High Court challenge against their so-called anti-consort laws. This is from an ABC article from earlier in October this year. Quote, "The High Court in Canberra has upheld the New South Wales anti-consorting laws, which make it an offence for convicted criminals to repeatedly associate with each other. 3 men who were charged under the laws mounted the challenge on the grounds that they infringed the implied right to freedom of association in the Constitution and that they were at odds with Australia's international obligations. The laws were set up in 2012 to target bikie gangs, and the New South Wales government argued they served a legitimate end. Today, the court found the laws are valid and there is no such right to freedom of association. It also found that although the laws do impinge on the freedom of political communication, in this case they are an appropriate measure in the prevention of crime. The court also dismissed claims the laws were at odds with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights because that was not in the Commonwealth legislation." The article goes on, "The laws carry maximum penalties of 3 years in jail and a $16,500 fine for people who repeatedly consort with convicted offenders after being warned by police. 2 of the men behind the challenge belong to the Nomads bikie gang, but the third man is not a bikie and was charged with consorting while grocery shopping with his housemate. The laws were introduced in the 1920s to tackle Sydney's razor gangs, but were later scaled back because of concerns police were abusing their powers. The New South Wales Parliament revived them in 2012 in a response to a wave of gun violence involving bikies and organised crime groups. But police said the legislation was never just intended for gang members. End quote. So let me just give a recap of everything I've just read out. Our largest state, New South Wales, has anti-consorting laws which, among other things, can be used against non-gang members for grocery shopping with the wrong people. Our third largest state, Victoria, Queensland, has VLAD laws which can, among other things, outlaw any group of 3 or more people and place the burden of proof on the defendant. And now our second largest state is already, that's Victoria, already shaping up to do similar, just as we predicted on this show a week ago.
Yep. And it's important to reiterate that the Queensland VLAD laws don't have the word bikie anywhere in them, but they're anti-bikie laws, is what the media have said they are. They don't have bikie anywhere. It's association with a loosely based definition of a criminal organisation. Yeah. New South Wales have had those laws in for ages. Now, because of all of this, because of the snowball effect that is happening, it's coming back up to light. It's coming back to light, and now they can skew them to also fit that. And now, just as we predicted, other states are following in suit. Victoria said that they want this to stop bikies, just like Queensland and New South Wales have. Our legislation doesn't have the word bikie anywhere in it. It's not intended for bikies. It's intended for the general people. You're going to stop. It's madness. This is complete madness. And that article is just rubbish too. Listeners at home, you should have seen my face. Like, police are pulling their hair out, sources reveal. Like, where is this? Like, it's just, and people are getting away with this, and people are being, subconsciously programmed to accept this as the reality when, in all in order, you know what I mean? Like, there would be people down there in Victoria saying, it's working in Queensland. Look how it worked, blah, blah, blah. Look how this is happening. It's been validated by the High Court. We need to stop the bikies down here.
And in the vast majority of cases, you could say to them, why are you so scared of bikies? Have you had a run-in with them yourself? Well, no, but I mean, they're a big problem. Well, why are they a big problem? Well, because don't you watch the news?
Well, when I remember last weekend at the demonstrations, the G20, I was talking to a fellow there holding a placard about bikies. And when I discussed it with him, he said, no, the High Court didn't validate the laws. They just threw the case out because the people that came before it had no standing, because they hadn't been arrested. And that's all it was. They haven't invalidated the laws. They haven't not invalidated the laws. They've just thrown that particular appeal out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I guess the thing is, if you look at what happened with the High Court, which, like you pointed out last week, is the equivalent to the Supreme Court in the US, they're the white guys at the top, they didn't reject New South Wales's anti-consort laws. Again, this is anti-association laws. And they even said there is no implied right to a freedom of association. I mean, we don't have a Bill of Rights here in this country. All we have is implied rights. And that's our High Court saying, no, you don't even have those implied rights. This is happening today in Australia. Okay. And I think if more people... there are some people out there who have no sense. They have no concern for themselves or for their society. They're just lemmings. Okay, cool. But I think there's a big latent group of people out there who, if they realised what was happening, would start to arc up about it, and this would become important to them. And I guess that's why independent media is so important. We can get this information out to people. I mean, some of our listeners, I kind of feel for them because we've discussed so much of the federal anti-terror laws. Of course, there were 3 separate bills. Each one of them was Ukrainian that was passed. Now I'm sitting here talking about the state laws. Yeah, this is a full press attack from our federal government and our state government in consort with the media. And you have to ask yourself, is this a coincidence, or is there a reason why this is all ramping up? Not just here, but in Canada and other members of the Six Eyes as well. Why is it happening now? If you think it's a coincidence, I don't think there's much hope for you. There's an agenda at play here, and it is heating up very quickly.
Yeah, okay. Definitely. Can I, when you're talking about the Bill of Rights, there was a parliamentary inquiry in New South Wales quite some years ago now about introducing a Bill of Rights in New South Wales. And I put a submission in because we have got a Bill of Rights from Britain, 1688. And the Queen takes her coronation oath, and she guarantees in that oath to uphold those rights that we've got. We just don't know about them, and we don't enforce them. Yeah. And these clowns, well, in that Bill of Rights, it gives them parliamentary immunity for anything they say in Parliament. So they can't divorce that from our rights, even though they try to. Because that's the only reason we don't go in there and sue them for what they say in Parliament. So there's this thing on that we just don't know. That's our problem.
Yeah, that's a fair enough call, and whether we do have the rights written down somewhere, whether it's the Magna Carta or elsewhere, or we don't have the rights written down, the point is our High Court is saying, as far as we're concerned, you don't even have implied rights. Like they're saying, they're not even addressing the fact that we may not have express written rights. They're saying you don't have any rights. Like that's their own ruling.
No.
And that was from earlier October of this year. And I'll be honest with you, until I started doing research for that segment for today's show, even I didn't know that the High Court had said that in early October. Now, you think about it, we spend more time discussing legislation as a group here because we want to get the information out to the viewers. So before we do that, we have to do our own research. If someone like myself was completely unaware that our High Court had said you have no implied right to association, that means that the vast majority of people have no idea that that's the case. Now, some of the vast majority of people would say, well, I don't care anyway. I trust the government, I trust the media. You know, those people are hopeless. But there would be lots of people out there saying, hold on, that actually did that really happen? That's significant. I'm going to look into that. And that's why it's so important we get this information out. Now, we have to move on.